So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House. We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie. Eamon, Nathan Kinsella and his intriguing lifestyle and connections is back on our radar because of just some details you've got from a new Criminal Assets Bureau case targeting him. Of course, Nathan Kinsella is a former Real IRA member who was jailed, who once was a close associate, kind of a number two really, wasn't he, for Alan Ryan, the murdered Alan Ryan. We're going to go into a little bit of his background, but start, I suppose, by saying why he is back being named again by the CAB.
Yeah, so I suppose this just came up recently in the CAB list, the proceeds of crime list, which is heard in the High Court once a month, and they list the various cases. And in this case, it was Nathan Kinsella and a gentleman called Richard Buriani and a company called Ecom Limited. And so Nathan Kinsella is one of those, like his name is first and others. So the other two are basically notice parties. So they're warned about the case because they may or may not have claim on these assets. And all that we've heard so far is that it centres on 3 vehicles. Mm-hmm. We don't know exactly what kind of vehicles there are or whether indeed he was driving them or the price or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we've yet to hear any of the evidence in this. But, you know, I suppose it's not the first time he was named in a CAB case, because if you remember, there was one about an organised crime gang in the Midlands where they were talking about the various people's connections with crime. And in this case, it was one of this particular family were actually held hostage by people that and the guards suspected Nathan Kinsella was involved in this. They were extorting money from drug dealers.
How long ago was that?
This is 2012, so this is, quite some time ago. I mean, he's certainly not your run-of-the-mill sort of criminal character that we often talk about. Like, he's an unusual. He's a tall guy living in a nice house in leafy suburbs of South County Dublin.
Let's get to that. First of all, I think it's interesting the kind of, as you say, some people are often named on Criminal Assets Bureau proceedings as respondents, which means they aren't necessarily the target of the case, but they may want to lay claim to some of the assets that are in question. And in this case, it's, will you tell me?
Yeah, so in this case, I mean, really all we know at the moment is that it's definitely our Nathan Kinsella, and then Richard Buriani, who is a director of this company called Ecom. And Ecom is also mentioned separately, because a limited company is treated as a separate entity.
Right.
And they have, a company has to be legally represented in court. A director can't come up and speak on the behalf of a company, which we know about because of other previous cases, similar ones that have happened in the past.
Was that, say, a similar case, would that have been with Marcus Sweeney?
Not so much. But he was represented, I think, as far as I remember, in one of the cases. I mean, he was given audience, I think. Well, I remember him speaking in court a couple of times, but other times, like, he didn't.
Wasn't there a piece of land and there was it was in a company name?
Yeah, it was his Evergreen Wealth Management was his firm at the time. But there was another one since involving kind of a Lithuanian and Pakistani couple who were basically funneling money from, cyber fraud in the UK, from invoice fraud and so on. And that was being put into assets in Ireland. They bought a car company and all the rest. And they eventually lost the case. But one of the women, she was constantly turning up in court and being told that, you've no right of audience. You're not, just because you're a director of a firm, it's the firm that was being targeted by CAB and not the director. Okay. It was kind of, but anyway. So, I mean, what we did hear in the court in this one was that Nathan Kinsella had been served legal proceedings, had been served notice of them, which they're obliged to do, that the director had been served. Both of the men had been served personally. So we know that they were given the all the notice. Now, there was a bit of evidence about the guard who said when they went looking for Ecom at the address in Fitzwilliam Square, they couldn't find any plaque or anywhere to go. They were directed to another floor in the building and again couldn't find anything. And then I think it was on a second attempt, hit the intercom button and said, look, we have papers, we need to get these to the company. And they were just told, just go inside the front door. There's a postal basket inside, you can leave it there. So they were asking the judge, look, is this deemed service good? Like, is this okay? And the judge says, yeah. And in future, you can post your any future kind of legal notices, because each step of the way, they're going to, they'll be notifying the parties involved. And I mean, in this case, because it's cars, and they said as much, like, the next kind of, I suppose, item on the agenda is going to be to sell the cars, because that's often in the interest of the people, the respondents who are the people who own the cars, in the basis that if they do get them back, they won't have depreciated. So they'll still get the money, what the cars are worth at the time they were sold, rather than depreciating. So, I mean, what do they call it? Wasting assets. So once if there's a wasting asset, they'll always bring a motion, like to kind of.
So they sell it and they park the money in an account.
Exactly.
And that's what then the argument is over.
And then the money becomes the subject of the Section 3 order.
What did you find out about this guy, Buriana?
Yeah, so he's the director of Ecom, along with another guy, Christopher Clark. They're both from Navan, and they're both 25. Like, we had a look at some of the company records, and they seem to have been the company Ecom is also linked to another Kaizen. It's kind of a clothing firm. It's not kind of a clothing firm. It's an online clothing firm, and they sell Christian themed T-shirts and gym bags and shorts and T-shirts and
Christian themed.
It's Christian themed. Some of the stuff has kind of strong imagery of biblical figures with quotes in the Bible. I suppose the religious icons on baseball caps,
like
and
a Jesus T-shirt you're talking about.
No, it certainly gives the impression of being slightly more Old Testament, or kind of even sort of like, they would use the crosses that we would associate with the Crusades, that kind of stuff. That sort of because they're into kind of, their other firms as well are very much, they're about kind of gym wear. And about stuff you're going to be using in the gym.
It's about fitness. With a message on it,
and athletic, yeah. And I suppose there's other people have Japanese cuddly toys on their T-shirts, and some people might and they have versions of the firm set up in the US as well, also in Dubai and so on. I mean, and there'd be plenty of good reasons for that. Like if you're shipping from suppliers in the Middle East or the Far East. And then if you're drop shipping or you're shipping to people in the US, it's much quicker if you have your own company.
Has this thing got a website?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of them. I'll just get you the exact name because I've forgotten it briefly. But the Kaizen clothing comes up.
I see it. UK streetwear through purpose. Is that it?
Yeah, and so we had a look at that. And I mean, they're making about. For the last 2 years, they've been making $1 million a year in profits. Sorry, this is Ecom has been making, which is linked to the it's the same two directors, and they're both guys own it. So whatever way they have their companies set up, like they're quite successful. They're very successful. Now, it's important to say that being named as a correspondent or a notice party doesn't mean any there's been any involvement in criminality.
I just wanted to see the religious T-shirts.
Yeah. And what do you think?
Well, I'm not sure I'm in the right place because it looks kind of like streety. The one I'm in.
Well, it's Saint Kaizen. Sorry.
Oh, Saint
Kaizen. Yeah, I was listening.
SAINT or ST?
SAINT.
Ah.
And then Kaizen, KAIZ.
Aha.
You'll see it there.
I see it now. Oh my God! Runners with a cross on them.
That's the one that's come straight up. Yeah, and then you see if you go down to the next one, then you see
Isaiah cross sneakers.
Soldier embroidery hoodie, which is $67.95 with a big Crusader.
I've got a mystery discount.
Oh, there you go.
Daily honouring God or streetwear or strengthening you. I'll just say daily honouring God. Oh, I don't want 10% off. No, thanks.
And you can get your socks as well for a little.
Fear not duffel bag.
and T-shirt quotes with Isaiah 54:17.
Cross performance shorts. Cross socks, 3 packs. We're giving this company a huge amount of publicity here. Just out of my general. He has risen on the back of a hoodie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, look, I mean, it works for some people.
It does.
So, I mean, we shouldn't really mock. Well, not mock, but laugh. I mean, look, we shouldn't be laughing if they're making one. I mean, whatever million. They're clearly very effective entrepreneurs, and there's obviously a huge market for this style of wear, Christian themed sportswear. Whether it's in the US or the UK or in Eastern Europe or in France or Germany, wherever.
So here's what it says on this about them, right? Saint Kaizen was founded in April 2022 by Christopher Clark and Richard Brianna, Having already found success with another clothing brand, the two devout Christians wanted to combine their expertise in apparel with their love for Christ, and thus St. Kaizen was born. It gained traction in July 2022 when the well-known Christian influencer Alex Eubank joined the team. Since then, we've maintained our momentum, growing year over year, expanding our product line, improving the quality of our pieces, and most importantly, spreading the word of Christ to millions both online and offline through our clothing. Our goal moving forward is to create the largest community of Christian gym goers, giving glory to Christ every step of the way. I'm sure they didn't imagine they were going to show up in a Criminal Assets Bureau case, but a fantastic segue into a point you wanted to make. Many people don't imagine they can be named in Criminal Assets Bureau cases, including, was it AIB or Bank of Ireland?
So in the same session, or the same High Court here in the Bank of Ireland were essentially the target of CAB. Now, obviously, at this point, we should say there's absolutely no allegation of wrongdoing on the bank. But it was an interesting case in that the bank contacted the Criminal Assets Bureau to say that they basically had this money that had been frozen and it was put into this fraud prevention account. And these are like lots of different transactions over a period of years up to 2019, so 7 years, so which means that the assets now be seized under the legislation. And a couple of years ago, they wrote to the bank saying, we don't want this fraud money on our books. How do we go about giving it back to you or the state? So the only way the way they did it was that the Bank of Ireland were basically, targeted, I suppose, by CAB in the usual way. There was a Section 3 given, and then, they went for Section 3, to have it declared the proceeds of crime and then have a receiver appointed over it, which gives the Criminal Assets Bureau the power over the funds, which in this case amounted to about 470,000. But they went through, it was in the affidavits with the evidence, it was meticulously kind of shown where every penny came from, and that there had been close to $1 million in this account, but some of it they were able to give back, and in most cases, most of the money is given back. But this kind of 470,000 was what was left of money that they couldn't give away. Like they couldn't find the victims, or the victims had disappeared, or the victims' bank weren't going to give them a letter of indemnity, which is one of the things. And they went through some of the cases, and there was a couple of very interesting case studies. Like of the 56, I think there was only 6 where there was guarded investigation, and there was only 3 where there were actual prosecutions or certainly convictions. But most of them, the vast majority, there was no investigation because the guards had deemed it was impossible, because in some cases the funds had already been layered, that they had come through another victim's account. So you could have had 3 or 4. So where the original money came from, they had no idea. So in some cases where they did, for instance, say there was one case where there was 57 grand from a German bank into this account in Ashbourne, which had been set up by a lady who wanted to, she had a business importing African goods. And then all of a sudden there was these strange, I suppose, transactions on her account. There was one, as I mentioned, for 57 grand, which was immediately flagged. And I think there was a request came from one of the banks looking for it back, and they sent it back. And then there was a second transaction a day later for 45. But the bank then wouldn't give a letter of indemnity for a second time. And this actually came from an Indian company where obviously their invoicing was redirected by fraudsters. But it gives you an idea how difficult it is to combat this, that you had a company in India that's been targeted, where funds are gone to an account in Germany, and then going from an account in Germany to Ireland, where somebody is then trying to take out 9,500 in a branch in Dublin, then another 10 grand in another branch, and then ringing up and looking for 17. Can she take 17,000 out, and being refused? So half of the money ended up being stuck in this account forever, for the last 7 years. So it's only now that it's finally gotten rid of. But there was other stats, like they talked about the 44 million in 3 years has been gone through Irish accounts that they suspect has been taken. And that the Bank of Ireland mentioned something like in the previous year had notified 22,000 suspicious transactions, which is an incredible number. And I had to read that twice to make sure I didn't get that wrong. But it gives you a whole insight into just how big this is, and it's quietly going on, and we would never hear about it, except for the odd time you get these kind of money mule cases, which has been a lot. But at the same time, it's only a tip of the iceberg. Even though we think there's been a lot of money mules, it's only literally the tip of the iceberg.
Now, getting back to Nathan Kinsella and obviously Richard Buriana, which is all we know at the moment, is He and his company has been named as respondents on the case against Kinsella. He is clearly a hugely successful businessman who has posted profits of more than $1 million from his online clothing companies, which sell religious branded hoodies and gym equipment. So really, until we hear further evidence on him or any claim he may be laying over the vehicles which are linked to Kinsella, we'll wait until we hear further evidence on that. But Kinsella, for those who don't remember, and he does have a very interesting history. He is a very unusual kind of a criminal, and he's currently living in a house in Blackrock, which is worth about 1.5 million. Has been living in it since certainly about 5 or 6 years, as far as I know. The house is owned by a builder who was caught up in the demise of a very well-known business family. Kinsella was one of Alan Ryan's thugs back in the day when Alan Ryan, the head of the Real IRA, was going around trying to extort money out of drug dealers, an activity which cost him his own life. Nathan Kinsella has previously given evidence that he was getting money from, there was an amount found and having gone through his account and his partner's account.
Yeah, it was 230,000.
230,000.
This came out in the special criminal court, and we suspect that it was, I suppose,
while he was unemployed.
Yeah, and we suspect it was a Dublin businessman in his 30s. And I'm just saying that, so we're not talking about the more recent younger men as being anyway involved in them, like just making that point.
Okay, so it's a totally separate businessman. He told the court had kind of like he was friends with him and that this guy would gift him this money. Can you do that without
No, you can give $3,000 a year.
Yeah,
and that's it.
So this was 250,000.
Yeah, so no, it's income that you should be declaring.
It's income you should be declaring, and you should be paying tax on unless it's a relative.
Yeah, and you spent about a year inside, wasn't it, for that?
Was it for that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was 2024. He went into jail, and he claimed, and the courts accepted that he was in very ill health, and he had to present himself to the prison at the time. So he did a year for that.
Yeah, and if you remember, we did a story in January 2025. And he was kind of out at that stage, but his partner had a dog grooming business in Clondalkin, so he was coming out of that. We were doing our best to take a pick of him. So but he was driving a nice high spec Audi again.
Yeah, he does appear to live a lifestyle that would suggest he himself is a very successful businessman.
Yeah,
where he lives, the cars he's kind of drives in, and he is also a guy that, of course, I think he was previously married and had a very large family, came from the North Inner City, and he is with a new partner now who he met, in recent enough years, and together they live in this sort of what could be described as a mansion in the Blackrock area.
Yeah.
Very peculiar, the whole setup, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously...
The question's been asked through the Criminal Assets Bureau.
He's obviously got a certain amount of charisma or something.
Yeah.
He's able to attract such people.
Well, he's able to attract a lot of friends who gift him things.
And it's like, and I suppose he was done that time for money laundering, or rather the not paying tax.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was money laundering charges he was actually were brought against him.
Yeah. I think he may have pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of tax offence.
But he got 2 years sentence in 2004 where he pleaded guilty to IRA membership, and he was the colour party over
2004.
Yeah.
14?
14 according to our own website that I'm looking at.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah.
And so he was part of that colour party that did fired over the coffin of
Alan Ryan.
Yeah. And then like before that, I suppose he would have come to notice he was shot, if you remember, in November 2012, and it was supposedly the Real IRA from the north of Ireland had come down to express their concern about how things are being run in the south, and felt that things weren't going the way they should for whatever ideological reasons or whatever.
And prior to that, have you any background on him?
Yeah, well, that was what I mentioned earlier. Like it was involved one of these Longford drug dealers. It was a guy called Thomas Oliver Keenan, and he was the target of an alleged false imprisonment at his home in 2011. And this was, as the Gardaí said in the affidavit evidence at the time, this was a drug debt owed to Republican figures. And Keenan is actually described in that case as being one of the first significant drug suppliers in the Longford area. And Kinsella was one of 4 men arrested and later released without charge over the incident, and was later seen with Ryan talking to Keenan outside a courtroom, like on a further date. So this is all used in evidence about Keenan's involvement with criminal figures, and at a serious level. So it was interesting that we heard about him in that capacity. Well, we've also heard other I suppose parts of the forest, like his involvement in other activities that have been attributed to Republican gangs, but seem to be pretty much about making money.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, let's wait and see what comes out and what evidence is heard in relation to these cars and his relationship to the businessman from Navan, because this case has opened essentially now, and you'll be hearing evidence in the coming months from the Criminal Assets Bureau. Yeah.
We will.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Eamon.
Thanks, Nicola. Always a pleasure.
If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised, but the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that? Do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories, because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there, but the guy had moved on. He'd called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on, he wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens. Divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after been a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. We're after, there's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired, and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera, because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. So you don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday, and this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. His brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, it wasn't, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from the Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.